Hello and welcome to SJ Review Friday. Yeah, SJ Review. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are going to talk about Borat 2, the title of which I will not say, but Eric will in just a few moments. I'm Roth Cornet. That's Eric Goldman. You're you, and we're so happy to see you today. We are going to talk about Borat 2, and I promise you no impressions. Actually, it's not a promise I can keep. But
it can happen at any time. It just strikes.
Spoiler free for just a couple minutes, and then we're going to go into full spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet, stay with us for a couple minutes, then we'll give you a warning. We'll go into full spoilers, and we'll pull some comments from the chat via Ryan O'Toole, who, again, I can't promise will not be doing a Borat impressions. Eric, largely, big overview. One, are you a fan of this character in general? And two, do you think that this was a worthy sequel, given the fact that he had previously said there would be no sequel?
I am a fan of the character, and I'm a fan of the first film, which I revisited this week. I'll get to that a little bit soon before watching the second. The thing is that my biggest reason to kind of be, I don't know about a sequel is, honestly, the bad impressions in a way. It's like Borat, the character, overtook the movie at a certain point, right? And there was so many people doing so many bad impressions, it could get annoying. And I think that people kind of might be like, Borat, I'm sick of that. But you weren't sick of the movie. You were just sick of it, sort of the presence, that people were putting. When you actually look at what Sacha Baron Cohen does as this character in both films, it's pretty amazing. So I have to say I was very happy with this sequel. Maybe the first one is a little funnier overall, but this is a really strong sequel, which is always a real danger coming back this long after, 14 years after.
Yeah.
And I think they really nailed it. It takes a little bit to get going, I thought, but once it does, it is funny as hell. And my God, they actually managed to give a little heart. I got a little emotional from a Borat film, which sounds like a parody for me to even say that, but it's true. So I was very impressed by Borat subsequent movie film. And then there's several different versions of where it goes next that I won't go into.
I'm going to challenge us, if we can, by the end of this, to say all of them.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And I think probably one of the reasons that he said there wouldn't be a sequel is because he smartly understood that once the first movie was released and was a massive hit, he wasn't going to be able to fool people as this character anymore. And in fact, that's true. They play into and they lean into the idea that Borat himself is famous and therefore he is getting chased. And so he then goes into disguise. And unlike the first movie, this one actually has a clear narrative arc. Now, there are sketches and vignettes within this movie, obviously, but it isn't just a series of strung together sketches and vignettes and moments and kind of gotchas. There's a through line here. There's a plot, right? And the plot is that after X number of years in prison, Borat is released to come on a secret mission, which is, again, why they use that as a reason that he has to dress up and hide to the United States to deliver a present to Mike Pence. And the present becomes his daughter, who that's where we get to the absolutely breakout star-making performance by Maria Bakalova, who plays his daughter, Tutar, and she is so committed to this role. She is so funny. She is so absolutely balls to the wall and truly, truly talented. She is giving Sacha Baron Cohen, who is arguably the best at what he does, because it's such a weird thing that almost no one else does, that a real run for his money in this movie. And she almost steals it. So I have to say, in agreeing with you, because there's an actual narrative arc that's a father-daughter story, Borat learns something at the end of the movie. He learns something about family. He learns something about misogyny, about bigotry. At the same time, and this is where we want to preface this and make this very clear, a lot of people use the term politics in movies incorrectly. They're actually not talking about politics at all. However, this is a deeply political film. It's a film about the United States in 2020. It's a film about the election. It's a film about COVID, which has been politicized, sadly. And it is very, very much plainly a takedown of Trump supporters. Mm-hmm. And that means both his direct advisors like Giuliani and the people on the ground. What we should note is that all of it should be taken with a grain of salt, because the movie is selecting the people and the moments that it chooses to depict, and it's manipulating them. This is not a mockumentary. These are two actors. It's basically a social commentary version of Punk'd. you know?
Yeah.
Like that's what it is. And it's sketch at the same time. So it's a really weird mix of things. But if you are a Trump supporter, you are not going to like this movie. You're just not, you know, unless you have a great sense of humor. And then why are you anyway, Eric?
Yeah, it's got an agenda. This movie does have an agenda, clearly. But if you could, that's the thing about rewatching the first one. I was like, wow, people forget just like how biting the first one was, because again, the character kind of overtook the movie at a certain point. So you forget how biting, but also how, my God, how much they went for it and how kind of shocking it can be to see some of the things they did in the first one. So in the second one, which is more of that, but also with a much more, not that the first one had no agenda, but this one has a really pointed one. It is meant to be released right before the election, clearly. So yeah, that's definitely got to be taken into account. But I also want to say, especially before we get into more spoiler territory, really, how amazing, Maria Bakalova is. It is everything you said. I just have to agree with, especially because in a way I was like, wow, this movie's kind of doing everything that is kind of become a cliche with a many years later sequel that can also go horribly wrong, including like the main character has a kid or a teen sidekick. We're going to appeal to the kids. But it does it so well especially because they found this actress, who just went for it, who becomes his full equal. They are a comedy duo, but also then she can go off on her own. There are some sequences that are completely about her, when she gets up and makes a certain speech at a podium at a women's conservative group that are just her anchoring the entire thing. Yeah, I know. And it's really amazing that they found someone who could do this. It is such a star-making performance. It's kind of amazing.
Forgive us, but I'm just laughing remembering it because that's how funny she is. She is so good, and I honestly can't wait to see what this woman does next. But I think right before we get into total spoiler territory, I will say this: a slight asterisk on what I said before, which I was surprised, given that this is, again, to your point, a very, very agenda-driven film, that it allowed the space for some humanity. And we'll get into that, what I mean by that, when we get into full spoilers here in a moment. But I want to add this on. I think for some people, this is going to be two things. One, tricky because satire right now is tricky because the world that we're in and the reality that we're in is so insane and so deeply fundamentally broken and psychotic that it is hard for satire to do its job. You know, the creators of Veep talked about that. So because it's just a razor thin line between satire and just the truth, right now. So it almost starts to eat itself a little bit. That's one thing. And then two, it's about America in 2020. So it's, there's something sad about it because there's something very sad. And it's about our political culture. And there's a deep and profound sadness there right now. But the movie, that said, what's amazing to me is that all of that being said and all of that being true, it is funny. I was cracking up the entire time in a way that I didn't expect to because Borat can't work anymore, right? Like you can't fool people anymore. We're too savvy for that. And yet it's still, even when you get that they kind of know what's going on, it's still really funny.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, right? It's like because there are parts in this movie for sure where you're like, okay, I feel like this person is kind of in on it, like Sacha Baron Cohen was buddies with them beforehand, but just kind of understood what was happening when this guy came up to him and is like going along with it. That's going to inevitably happen. But yeah, and also, like you said, it's like 2020 is such a screwed up time. I've seen other people mention this in reviews, and I agree. One thing they can't quite replicate from the first film is just the innate, oh my God, I can't believe that person would ever say that on camera. Because now we've seen people will say anything on camera, often with no consequences. So it can't quite replicate that, even though you still get people saying and doing things on camera that's still like, I can't believe people will do this, even though at this point it's become a little more common, which is a little scary. But yeah, I think like he still manages to make it so funny. And like he said, I mean, also it's like, yeah, he's picking and choosing, of course. Maybe the first plastic surgeon they went to didn't say his horrible things, so they went to another plastic surgeon. But still, the fact that these people are out there existing among us is sometimes it's a little sobering fact that this movie helps us process.
Yeah, and in that sense, it is very funny and it is very comedic, but it's darkly comedic,
Yes.
like in the truest sense of that. So, with that said, we will now move into 100% spoiler-filled zone. So this is your warning that we are going into spoilers, and if you've already seen this movie, it's out. It was available to you last night, so if you've already seen this movie and you have your own thoughts that you want to chime in with, we definitely do want to hear them. We will be going to Ryan for those comments, so just go ahead and leave them in the chat right now. And then also Ryan will be listing all of the names of this movie that exist. So Ryan, be prepared for all of that. 1, 2, 3, spoilers! Okay, we got to talk about the Giuliani scene because
you want to go right there.
I just want to go right there because I think what happened was, and I think this is unfortunate, you know, I was watching the movie on a screener and Eric, I'll just tell the story if that's okay. So Eric slacks me and he says,
and it was like almost midnight, by the way. I just was like, wanting to talk to someone else.
Like, have you seen Borat? ? And I was like, yeah, I'm halfway through. I wonder what's going on. And so then I get to the scene and of course I'm just eyes bugging out of my head and oh my God, is that real? Blah, blah, blah. And it was just this total like wow moment that is ruined because now people are expecting it.
Yeah.
The clip is out there. And I think taken out of context and given that you expect it to come, you're expecting something bigger to happen. Yeah. So you almost, I think the inherent result is that people are diminishing what did happen. You know, they're like, well, it's not as, and that said something about the world we're in, Eric, because it's like, I feel like what I'm hearing is like, oh, I mean, he didn't just go ahead and whip it out and therefore it's fine. You know, I will say you could interpret that he is tucking his shirt back in. You could.
Yes.
But I don't. Eric?
Yeah, the tuck. It's pretty, yeah. So, you know, we both watched this movie a couple nights ago on a screener. And yeah, I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. I mean, I can't believe, again, it's 2020. Sacha Baron Cohen has been doing this for, you know, longer than 14 years because he was doing Borat and other characters before that on Ali G. I still can't believe that he is able, yes, through the guise of this other girl has playing his daughter, but that he was able to make this interview happen, right? Like, who is vetting? Right. And what is the vetting process here? That she was able to get that hotel, right? That's right. That he is able to do that. And we'll talk later about some of the stuff with like Pence and stuff, which was still crazy on its own. Yeah. So there's the fact the interview existed at all, and then the fact that so quickly it turns into like, yeah, like of course she is goading him on. That is the point. She's patting his knee a bunch and all.
Yeah.
But to see how quickly he falls for it, goes for it, tries to eat a bat with you into a flirtation. That was all. And
and he asked for her phone number. And I want to pull this out. Not enough people are talking about this. Her address. That's so weird. Even if you're just trying to follow up with someone because you want to.
What's your address? Yes.
What's your address is so weird. Why do you need that?
Yeah. But like you said, it did suck. And I kind of knew it would get out there, even though I was hoping because, when we were sent the movie, everyone who was sent the movie was asked to please not reveal anyone he talks to. And of course that wasn't going to happen. People were going to talk about it. And then people quickly got very specific on it. And it was like, oh man, it's such a great reveal if you don't know. And I feel happy for anyone who's able to watch this movie this weekend who didn't know that going in. Yeah. Also, like you said, people will build it up themselves to be even worse than it is. And some people were saying things that just factually weren't true. Like they were like, he thought she was 15, which is not presented in the movie. Like, he thought she was a young reporter, apparently. So just to amplify it. But like you said, all that aside, is still really creepy and crazy. And like, I can't believe it's actually and I just can't believe that Sacha Baron Cohen is able to still accomplish these things. It's funny. I went into this movie with trepidation and now I kind of do want there to be a third one day just to complete the trilogy and to see how he would possibly approach still getting these people because man, he still is able to.
Well, okay, so candidly, I guess, and this is the final thing we'll say about this, unless there's more in the chat. I would agree with the following things. I think you're right that things were misrepresented in the press when that scene was talked about, and therefore people expected something out of it that wasn't going to happen. You know, I candidly do think that I saw that too. Oh, he knew she was 15. We never see her say that until the point the Borat runs in, the Sacha Baron Cohen runs in and says, "No, she's 15. She's too old for you." Like, you know, before that, we have no idea what age. I presume that wasn't discussed, you know?
Right.
So there's a number of things that I agree with you. And you could interpret, and maybe it's true that he was tucking in his shirt after she had taken off his mic. All of that aside, it's wildly, he was clearly, and on camera, asked for her phone number and address. She's clearly quite young, even if she's not, in his mind, 15.
Yeah.
And he's clearly interested in pursuing relations.
Yes.
And
the waist pat,
the whole thing. And it's possible, he certainly took a long time tucking in his shirt, is all I'm saying.
Yes.
And so all of that to say, I think what I'm highlighting is, and the weird part of the world that we're in, is that everyone wants to be in their own narrative and doesn't just want to be, it's not okay to be in the narrative that exists. And that too, our standards are so totally messed up right now for like behavior that you're just like, oh, it's fine. You know,
right.
This is the group. And I say this not judging this at all, but this is the group of people that is, the administration and the advisors that are appealing quite strongly to people like Mike Pence's people, evangelicals. And that's fine if you're an evangelical, but wouldn't you presume that this is behavior that isn't considered appropriate in that sect? You know, that's all I'm saying. It's just highlighting the hypocrisy.
Oh yeah.
Which, by the way, if you're, I'm not saying that's like, a Republican or Democrat thing, because it's not. It's a human thing, because we are all flawed and crazy, you know? Yes. But this is just a movie that's illustrating that. So that said, that's the Giuliani sequence. Let's talk about some of the other moments in the movie, because I will say another side of the coin real quick. I do think that we're living in a world where we can, it's like such, in the United States politically right now, it's such an us versus them space. And it's really heartbreaking, actually, to me. I'm speaking very personally. It's very heartbreaking to me. And it's not the world I think that we should live in. And I think we can have different political perspectives and still communicate and still be friends even, you know, and there's other areas for us to connect on. It doesn't all have to be about politics. So I will say, though, that it was surprising to me, and I had to have like a reconciliation with myself, that these two people that he's quarantining with are able to see a conspiracy theory when Borat presents it from his country, but they are not able to see the pure insanity of what they are hook, line, and sinker believing. And that goes back to our original point of like, just objective truth is something we're rejecting right now on either side. It's all about point of view. And so they're not able to see that. And we might then dismiss them as whatever, you know, but they have quite a bit, they care about the stranger. And they go out of their way for him. They have humanity. They are caring.
Yeah, they actually like say like, no, women are equal at one point. Like, you know, they're the same as us when he's saying all his craziness with his book and how they are born. That is one of those ones where I really wish we hopefully ever get a proper behind the scenes on this one day. Like those two guys, I want to know a little bit more, because it's like, yeah, who were they? How, you know, we saw him just walk up to them, but then he is Borat. You know, a lot of this movie, again, because it's the meta thing of that within the world of the movie Borat came out and made him famous, so he has to go in disguise. But there are occasional parts where he's just Borat with other people, and he's Borat with those two guys. So did they really not recognize him as Borat? What was going on? Like but at the same time, like you said, it's fascinating because they are full, like, you know, I don't know if they're actual QAnon, although he makes a reference to QAnon around them, but they are believing a lot of crazy stuff about adrenaline glands and drinking blood. But at the same time, are also like, oh no, this isn't true, and that's a conspiracy theory, and women are the same as men. So it was interesting to kind of get that. I guess apparently he lived with them for like 5 days or something crazy like that. So there's a whole lot to unpack with that.
And they're also, listen, I mean, clearly they know there are cameras there and they're going to be on
Yeah.
camera and maybe that's interesting. But,
Mhm.
you know, certainly like, I think it just speaks volumes that it's like and this is sort of, I think the point I'm trying to make is that one-on-one human being to human being, they come across somebody and they decide to care about this person, you know, or at least that's what it appears. They are able to discern a really crazy conspiracy theory. They're able to say women are equal to men and, you know, have like beliefs that you and I would agree with, I think.
Mhm.
And yet they believe this totally bonkers conspiracy theory and that Democrats on the whole, are more dangerous than Corona, you know, and that's what tells you how, to me, they demonstrate how broken we are, which is that the humanity is there when you get one-to-one, you know, the
Well,
ability to connect is there, but this wild disinformation has gotten, and like the lack of trust in institutions has gotten so broken that no one is willing or to agree upon plain truth and reality. No one's willing to investigate. Even to your point about Giuliani, I think there's that scene is seen through the lens of your political perspective, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I will commend, again, as much as yes, of course, there's manipulation here as a film with editing and, you know, picking and choosing. At the same time, you know, yeah, with those two guys specifically, I'm glad he kept in what he kept in because he is goading them, of course. That's the whole point of Borat, is to see what can he say that these people will say on camera and how far will they go. So he's saying stuff like, you know, he's goading them to say about how they wish like Democrats didn't have as many rights as, you know, Republicans and all this stuff. But at the same time, he tries to goad them with like, women are born inferior to men, and they don't take that bait. In fact, they counter him. So it was interesting, right, to like see where it's almost like, again, I almost wish we had like got like a bunch more of like unseen footage with those guys, because it seemed like a whole strange microcosm was happening with him living with them.
Yeah, I found them fascinating because there were other characters in the film that we had less time with that said really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Like the doctor, like when she swallowed.
The pastor, you mean? Yeah, the baby.
The baby. The pastor, when she swallows the baby, and it's like his priorities are so skewed that he's missing, and it's only funny because it's fake, because in reality it's so horrific, that he's missing this crisis that this human being that is sitting right in front of him, it's clearly in his mind. In his mind, he's saying this woman is pregnant by her father. And you're not calling the police and intervening. You're saying, let's not worry about how we got here. No, how we got here is the pertinent information, sir. You know, like,
yes.
Oh my God.
But as an aside, by the way, as you're laughing at this about this movie,
it's horrible. It's horrible.
I know. I keep laughing. This is not the same scene. I just keep laughing about when he goes, "I want you to make a hot C out of my Nazi, or out of this Nazi."
Very, very upsetting. So I think that it's when you have those snippets, right? Those moments, that it's very easy just to go, my God, what a horrible, twisted person whose priorities are all out of whack. But that's the point. The point is, like, you spend a little more time and we start to find those connections. And that's what I feel like is an element of hope in the movie. Like Borat obviously learns this lesson, but I also found that though, again, what they said was so bonkers, and then they were willing to sing that song.
Yes, yeah. All the people at the rally, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so you end up, this movie is in an odd way, delivers a lot to unpack, you know, for a big, broad comedy, and it's got kind of layers to it. So another thing that, and Eric and I know we talked about this the other day, there's a sequence that a family member, the Holocaust survivor, Judith Evans, is not happy about her appearance in this movie. So I wondered, you know, it is one of those things where certainly she comes off as she's a lovely human being in the film, but it breaks your heart to see how quickly she accepts the fact that someone is scared of her and then believes that it is her onus to soothe them and assure them, no, I'm not scary. It just really broke my heart.
It was, it was very interesting, right? Yeah, because that sequence when he goes into the synagogue and with like the worst caricature of a Jewish person you could imagine, but that she just taught, and we should mention a little bit more behind the scenes that, like you mentioned, that her family's she passed away, sadly, since the movie was made. He dedicated the movie to her. And there is some talk that actually he had his producers go up to her after and kind of tell exactly what was going on, which he almost never does. A lot of people do not know they're going to be in this movie until it comes out. I actually checked the Instagram of the influencer that gives her all that advice about women, how all the terrible stuff she says about if you want to get a sugar daddy. Remember that lady? Yeah. And she basically said she didn't know she was going to be in the movie till this week. But anyway, so that part is that part though is it's very like emotional because this woman is just so quickly just trying to connect to him and being very sweet with him. I think the babysitter actually is the other big example of that. Yeah. The woman who's giving her all this advice about women and how you should really be treated and what, and she's basically telling her, I should say, Tutar, that everything you have heard from your father is wrong, but it even talks to Borat as the father and kindly. I do think that's the other thing. And this movie is coming out in this crazy time, and it's certainly got this major message about this crazy time, but he doesn't want it to be like nihilistic. And that goes back to the fact that he has this underlying, ultimately very sweet father-daughter relationship, which I think could have gone horribly wrong. Again, having this movie end up being like Borat coming to some sort of self-realization about women and ending on this very sweet sort of thing with him and his daughter could have felt so fake and so like, what the hell are you doing in the middle of the Borat movie doing this? But he actually managed to sell it. And like you said, this film is a very strange hybrid of prank, but also like a narrative with the two of them. And I was just very impressed by that. And I do like that those sort of moments of humanity from those, a couple of key people are in there along with the Borat character himself ultimately, which is a strange thing to see.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, to me, those two characters, the babysitter, I think, we spent more time with her. And so to me, she is like...
We go back to her. Yeah.
We go back to her. She is the moral center of this movie.
Yes,
so, like, she is the beating moral heart of this movie, in addition to Judith Evans, who is in that other sequence. It manages to display such patience and kindness, like in these circumstances where it would be entirely appropriate to just lose your shit and kick that person out. She doesn't. And the babysitter is the arc for Tutar's change, right? Like she's the one that opens her up to this idea that she can be and do more. Of course, what she decides to be and do is go be a super blonde journalist, which is fine. But in any event, I do think it is a movie that has a lot to say. And then there's sort of like this, that over the years, in the 14 years since we've seen Borat, there's the idea that Sacha Baron Cohen and the character itself is offensive. It's this major, broad caricature of Kazakhstan, right? And I think you mentioned this and made this point that the reason that he chooses Kazakhstan is because it's actually a commentary about the United States, and that we are at large so out of touch with the rest of the world that we will believe anything he says about it,
Which goes to, by the way, the fact that when they are speaking to each other, Sacha Baron Cohen is speaking Hebrew and she's speaking her native Bulgarian because they know that no one listening to them will know anything except that they're speaking a language that is not English.
Yeah. And that also speaks to their performance because they look like they're in a conversation with each other, and they know what the lines are, obviously.
Yes.
But still, it's just it's commentary on commentary on commentary. And I know that there are some folks that are a little disappointed with this film, but I actually think it's just like a time capsule, a really sad and scary time capsule, but a time capsule that says a lot about us. So we have talked for a long time, Eric. I appreciate it. Thank you. But Ryan, we want to know what the comments are saying. Do
It's a fun comment, though. Yeah, people who have seen the movie are engaging. I think most people, I think generally who are in the comments who have talked about it, who saw the movie, said that they like it. I'll go through some. Let's see. Jared Johnson said that he was on the West Coast and watched it last night after the debate. I wonder if that was on purpose. Maybe it was, Jared. I think a lot of people had that strategy to either do debate and Borat or use Borat instead of the debate. Jenna James says that agrees that Maria will be a wanted actress for the next 2 to 3 years. Mark my words. That's what Jenna says.
What happens after 3 years? I hope she keeps going.
Yeah, just a short shelf life. Hollywood's like that.
Jenna understands Hollywood.
Yeah, Jamra loved the film. Lucas just finished a movie and said it was great. Lucas brought up a good point that I think, Roth, you were hinting at, where Lucas is saying, this movie I'm praying is of its time. And I say that because optimistically, I want people in this country to see this in 60 years and actually be like, were we actually like this? So that's what Lucas is hoping is look back on. And hey, Craig said, I haven't seen this movie yet, so I don't know what he's referencing, but the dance, I had to look away during the dance.
Oh, God.
We know what he's talking about.
Oh, my God. It was so uncomfortable.
It's pretty amazing. And again, that entire debutante sequence and
not that dance.
Not that dance. It's the two of them together when you see the father and daughter together. But yeah, just the whole thing when he says to the other dad, how much could I get for my daughter?
That
and the guy's
dance.
like, 500. Yeah, this dance, where it goes is...
One of my favorite moments is that the debutante that is beside the guy that says $500, she just looks, she's so pissed, and she just looks at him and goes, "You are disgusting. That is disgusting." And I was like, that to me is the line of the movie. You know what I mean? Like, yes. She's, to me, the Cassandra of the movie, where she's just talking about where we're at culturally, and she's just like, that is disgusting.
Right. Ryan, the first comment you read about the people who watched it right after the debate, and was that purposeful as far as time? They obviously they rushed. They wanted to get this movie out before the election. That much is 100% clear. But also, I think that once they realized it was going to be the same night as the debate, they released it early. It's supposed to come out today, but it ended up coming out right when the debate was starting last night. That obviously they must have known what they were doing. That either people would watch it instead of, or I saw a lot of people on Twitter say, "Okay, I just finished the debate. I'm going to watch Borat 2 now." There was a lot of that. So I think that was a savvy bit of, if not counter programming, maybe program boosting from Amazon putting it out at the same time.
Yeah, I think one final thing I want to kind of underscore, because this is a very political movie, right? It's after Trump. It is 100% after Trump and all that he represents in the United States right now. So having talked about that quite openly, what I want to say is my own perspective, which is, again, we have to remember that this is a movie, and they have selected subjects, and they have manipulated the circumstances, and they have edited it down to appear in a certain way. So it's just like when they go out on the street for late night shows, and I actually don't like this kind of humor anymore. So I was surprised I liked this movie as much as I did. And they go out in the street and they try to catch people out being dumb. I think it's mean. And I think it's really poor quality. And you spoke to 30 people and picked the 4 that got it so wildly wrong. Right. It's not an accurate representation of the world. So I think we do have to take something like this with a massive grain of salt and say that I believe and I hope that the worst of what we're seeing here is a very small portion of the reality of the world that we're in. But the glimmer of hope, and I know this is a little tricky, is that I take is that even in what I considered some of the worst of it was people believing these really, really inaccurate, wild, crazy, ugly conspiracy theories and thinking that an entire political party was their enemy within their own country. I still saw humanity, and that surprisingly, because I believed in the humanity of the other characters, our moral centers and the babysitter, but to see it in a place that I thought candidly didn't exist, or was starting to doubt, was actually affirming. I just think we have to get to a place of trusting one another again and knowing that political parties aren't a monolith. The worst of what we see in this movie that represents Trump supporters is not the Republican Party at large. It just isn't. We're not enemies,
Yeah.
I guess that's my lofty takeaway. I don't know.
No, I feel like the movie ends it ends on this kind of crazy emotional beat. Both, like, there's a lot, even the last couple minutes of this movie are crazy, right? Because the whole, like, we've replaced the running of the Jews with the running of the American. And so on one hand, he's just completely like, which in and of itself is interesting, right? Because the running of the Jews was clearly this horrible demonizing thing in the first movie. So on one hand, you could even say if the running of the American is replaced it's like, well, because Americans are easy to demonize and they're not all if you want to make a 1-to-1 there. On the other hand, it's also this sort of sad thing because what he parodies there with like the Karens and what are like things we're seeing a lot. But to your point, Roth, it's not everyone. And then I think, the fact that he does rest this sort of emotional core in this father-daughter bonding story, which is what right after you really end the movie on, is the two of them finishing the report together. And it's actually this kind of crazy, like, oh, look, like they've really come together here at the end thing. And then a blatant vote message at the end is optimistic ultimately, right? Like, I don't think the movie ends on a, like, there's no hope, in fact, by having Borat of all people sort of gain a little bit of perspective on the world and on women and on Jewish people, it is showing there's hope, I think. So I don't think the movie is like, oh, like we're doomed. But it's like, we got to work hard to fix a lot of these things.
I agree with you. I think the movie is saying that. And it's also, I think, inelegantly what I was trying to say. I don't think we're doomed. And I don't think this is most people. And this is what I know. This is what I was trying to say about those two characters that he quarantines with. The worst of us isn't all of us, right? Like, the worst moment that each of us has, even in a given day, isn't the totality of who you are as a person. And I think what scares me the most about the moment that we're in is that our thinking has become very binary. The very idea that a person can change, evolve, have a opinion that they amend and correct, or say something that they later realize was hurtful and they apologize for and correct. It's like we don't leave space for people to grow anymore. It's like if you thought something once in your life or you had an opinion that you've evolved over time, it's like no one lets you off the hook. And this movie, I think, is proposing like we can and should change, and that should be celebrated. We can and should find the humanity in one another, and that should be celebrated. That said, if someone consistently represents something and encourages really nasty, horrible behavior, then that should be noted as well. So anyway,
yes. Borat 2!
Borat 2! Any final comment? It was really funny. All of that said, it's really funny.
It's really funny. Yes, and there are moments of this. Yes, it makes me laugh, and I'm scared about the board impressions coming back, but it'll be worth it. That's the main thing I'll say is Borat 2 made me think that bad board impressions are worth it when we get good Borat movies every 14 years.
Ryan, will you take us out with any final comments and any bad Borat impressions?
No, I don't know if we have any impressions. I'm checking the chat. I'm not really seeing.
Very nice.
I will let people know that we will have. That was perfect. I love that one. I know some people were asking about Spencer and what he thought in the movie. We will have him give his thoughts on an episode of SJU next time he's on. So you will get Spenny thoughts on the movie as well. I know some of the chat was asking. Okay.
Yeah, we wanted Spencer to do this one with us, candidly, but he had a watch party he wanted to do tonight, so he didn't want to see it early. There you go. I guess what I'm trying to say is Spencer's not committed and he's very lazy, but he's so talented, so we keep him around. Just kidding. All right. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, chat. We are, as always, honored to be here with you today and to have you listen to our wild thoughts about Borat, which I did not know we would be able to have a 40-minute conversation about Borat, but there you have it. It's a very rich movie. We love you. I believe in us. we're all people together. We're all in it together. You don't have to agree with us. You don't have to agree with each other to still, at the end of the day, love each other. So that's it. That's my message. You're allowed to vote, but vote the way I want you to vote. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Love you guys. Bye.